I'm happy to see everybody. My name's Sammy Arnold, and I'm the executive director of the Japan American Society of Tennessee. I'm about 1.5 years into the job and having a great time and love the great work that we do and appreciate all you guys being here. And of course, this is our Reading Between the Lines series, which is like sort of our virtual book club. Is that a fair way to put it?
Absolutely.
And occasionally, I think we'll get together and do an in-person like we did back in the fall in East Nashville. So we'll have to do that again sometime. But and of course, we're lucky that this series is facilitated by our great local talent, Yurina. And Yurina is a great supporter of JAST, and we try to be a great supporter of hers as well. And so I'll read Yurina's bio here quickly. She's the director of education at the Porch, holds an MFA from Columbia University, and her writing has appeared in The Atlantic, NPR, LitHub, the Japan Times, and elsewhere. Yurina has been the winner of the Tennessee True Stories contest. She's a recipient of the Tennessee Arts Commission Literary Fellowship. And then last year, she was selected by South Arts as the Tennessee Fellow for Literary Arts. And then, as if that wasn't enough, she, among all the fellows from all the states represented in that organization, she won the inaugural Southern Prize for Literary Arts, which is awesome. And she's lived in Tokyo, Palo Alto, in New York before settling down in Nashville with her husband and 2 sons. And so the bio may be unnecessary for many of you because I know you guys know her well. But with that, I want to just turn it over to Yurina and let her take it.
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Sammy. And the feeling is mutual. I'll just say very quickly that when my husband and I moved to Nashville in 2017, we didn't know a lot of people, and we also didn't know a lot of Japanese people, but we found JAST and we found a lot of really wonderful, both Japanese people, but also Americans working for Japanese companies. And we all have so much in common. And I'm just so grateful that you're all letting me host these reading between the lines sessions. Very selfishly, I just, these are books that I love to read and discuss, and to be able to do this with your audience is just has always been so delightful. And I was looking back at my notes. This is our 7th reading between the lines together.
Wow.
And the first one was back in 2022. So
Wow.
this is like our 3rd year running. And just so grateful and delighted to be able to keep doing this. So thank you, Jast. Thank you, Sammy, Ginger,
Absolutely.
and Raina, and everybody who works there. And thank you all, too, for joining us on Zoom. In an age where I'm sure a lot of people are zoomed out, just tired of Zoom. I'm very appreciative of you just taking your evening to sit down in front of a computer to be here. And I will note that this session is being recorded for the purpose of, JAST will put this up on the YouTube channel for those who could not attend tonight. And throughout this session, if you've been with the, reading between the lines before, you know that it's pretty interactive. I like to invite you all to ask questions or insert comments. And, please feel free at any point to unmute yourself or even use the chat function if you want to, say something. This is not meant to be a one-way lecture. I would love to feel like a conversation. And then on that note, if I could ask for maybe 2 volunteers who are able to unmute themselves at a certain point and read some passages out loud, just so that you're not only hearing my voice for most of the part. So if you are able, could you raise your hand and I will note your names. And I will be sharing my screen, so all you have to do is read what you see on the screen. You do not have to have the book in front of you. Okay, Mary, thank you so much. Can I get one more volunteer? And William, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so I will call on you in a little bit. So I'm going to share my screen now to my little presentation. All right, let's start at the beginning. Oh, sorry about that. That's the very end. I need to start here. Okay. We are discussing a wonderful, heartwarming, charming book, The Great Passage by Shion Miura. The Japanese title, as you can see on the cover here to the right, if you're studying Japanese, this is Fune o Amu, which literally translates to weaving the ship. So you can see there was a little bit of a difference between the English translation, the Great Passage, but it still conveys the same feeling of, there's a ship in passing, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. What to expect tonight? I will go over who the author is. Who is Shion Miura? What do we need to know about her? And then a little overview of the book, as well as all of the wonderful adaptations that have come of it. And then once we get enough of the context of the book and the characters, because I like to design these sessions for people who may not have read the book, we can still enjoy some of these great passages. See what I did there? We can still enjoy these together. We'll close read a few parts that, with the context in mind, you should still be able to enjoy. And then we'll open up the last bit for open Q&A and discussion. Who is Shion Miura? Here's a wonderful little photo for, I love this like star-studded jacket, and she just seems like a very colorful person. She was born in 1976 in Tokyo, and like many contemporary Japanese novelists working today, she attended Waseda University. And for reference, Waseda is also where Haruki Murakami attended. Yes, yeah, and she was actually 35 when she wrote The Great Passage. So yeah, she was quite young when she made it onto the literary scene. But before that, she worked in various publishing departments, in the books department, but more notably in the women's lifestyle magazine department. And for those who read the book, you can probably connect some dots here. There is a character who was in the women's lifestyle magazine department who gets transferred over to the dictionary department. She also worked in used bookstores and apparently really loved it there. I mean, I would love working in a used bookstore too. That seems like a dream for anyone who's an avid reader. And for any Ghibli fans in the room, I found this really interesting. Was the copywriter and wrote the tagline for the movie when Marnie was there. Um, the tagline can be translated roughly to "I'll be waiting for you dash forever." And that seems kind of minor in some ways, but in other ways, I mean, that seems like a very coveted job for, a studio that's globally renowned. So just something to, yeah, just a little fun fact about her. The Great Passage, this novel was first serialized in Classy magazine between 2009 and 2011. And Classy, in case you're not aware, it's one of the most popular fashion magazines in Japan. I know my mother had these magazines lying around every month. It's very thick. It comes with lots of ads. Sometimes it even comes with like a little goodie that's attached to the magazine. Like if you buy it, you get a keychain or a purse or something. But Classy is read primarily, I would say, for women in their 30s and 40s. So I'm kind of the ideal audience for Classy magazine now that I think about it. But what's interesting is that a lot of novels in Japan are still serialized in magazines like this, in little bits. You can still find creative writing in fashion magazines. And in 2011, this was published altogether by Kodansha, which is one of the major publishers, and it subsequently won the Booksellers Award. So the book was published in 2011, and very quickly it became a bestseller. If you've read the book, I don't think you'd be surprised. I mean, it's just such a wonderful, heartwarming story. In 2013, it was adapted to a feature-length film. If you've watched Japanese films before, you might even recognize some of these actors. These are pretty big names. And this film, I have not seen it. I've only read about it and seen the trailer, but I think it follows the original book pretty closely in the timeline and the way it tells that story. In 2016, this was adapted into an anime series, and hopefully this will be available for American viewers soon because I am dying to watch this. I love anime. Oh, somebody wrote, I think Araki is the actor from Midnight Diner. Maybe. I haven't seen that show in a while, but I'll have to double check. Thank you for noticing that. And then 2017 was when the English translation came out by Juliet Winters Carpenter. And just a little pause here to acknowledge this translator is really renowned and has most notably worked on a very literary set of novels by Minae Mizumura. This translator has won awards. She has lived in Kyoto as well as Washington State. And I say this at every reading between the lines session, but I'm just always very impressed by the skill level and the nuances that these current Japanese translators are able to bring. And when you read this book, even if you don't know anything about Japanese society or, even if you've never been to Japan, the work will immerse you in that world and will make things clear. Um, and then let's see, Carpenter calls Mizumura a co-translator. They worked unusually closely. That's very interesting. Okay, I'll definitely have to look into that. Thank you, Allison. And then The Great Passage was adapted again very recently, 2024, into a TV series. And what's interesting about this adaptation is that it takes the protagonist. I have not seen this one either. I've only seen YouTube clips. But the protagonist in this TV series is the young female dictionary editor who is a side character in the original book. She even only appears in the last third of the novel. Her name is Kishibe, and it takes her perspective from the start of the series. So, you know, even though these are three different adaptations of the same work, that adapted from the same work, they're very different in nature, so you can still enjoy it. And I don't know of any other Japanese book that's been adapted so many times. All right. Let's see. And then I pulled some screenshots from the anime just to give context to the characters. And I thought this would be a fun way for those who might still be working through the novel or have not read it, just an overview of who these people are and just what you need to know. So Majime is the protagonist of this work, in my view. There's many characters in this book, but it really does center around him. And here I'm only noting their last names, and that's because that's how these characters refer to each other, which is very typical in a Japanese workplace or even in a school. People call each other by their last names, and that's just how they are. So Majime, he is a brilliant man, loves language and words, but he struggles so much socially. He's so awkward. And, it's kind of ironic that somebody who works for the dictionary department is such a terrible communicator. And Nishioka, his colleague, he's kind of the polar opposite. He's confident, he's an extrovert, he's always trying to like hit on women and always fails. But he really lacks depth. He's very shallow and he doesn't have the same intellectual level that Majime does. So they both bring something different to the table. And they have a little bit of a rivalry as well. But in the end, I mean, this is a workplace and they have to work together. Araki is their supervising dictionary editor. He's very determined to get this project done, but also determined to get it done right. Professor Matsumoto is the wise, aging man who's been working and conceiving of this dictionary project for decades, but he needs new, young people to take over. So the book starts with them trying to recruit these young fellows to the project. Kaguya, she is a chef, so she's not in the dictionary department, but she lives in the same share house as Majime. And she becomes his main cheerleader. And without Kaguya, I don't think Majime would be okay. Like I think without her, this is kind of a testament to, just the very complex ways that humans are able to work. Even somebody who is not directly in the dictionary department, she definitely has an effect on that as a result. And Kishibe, like I noted in the adaptation of the TV series, in 2024, Kishibe is the side character transferred from the women's lifestyle magazine department, and she thinks she's being punished for being transferred to the dictionary department, which is all dusty. Majime is like just this very awkward man who, doesn't look like he takes care of himself very well. And Kishibe is just very befuddled. Like, what is she doing there? But as the novel makes it clear, everybody brings something special to the project. So this book is really about a lot of things, but what you need to know is that it'll weave through, just like the title weave, in the original Japanese title, it weaves through many themes. And obviously, it's about how to make a dictionary. So it's going to talk a lot about words and the evolution of their meanings. It's also going to talk about how to make a dictionary within a competitive capitalist system. So even within this book publisher, these editors are always fighting to justify this project. And, other people in the sales department are saying, we can't spend more money and time on this dusty dictionary. Why do we need to do this? And the editors are constantly trying to say back, no, this is really important. And once we're doing it right, you're going to sell millions of these copies. Everyone's going to want one. It's all about teamwork in the workplace, which, if you're a fan of The Office or other, workplace dramas, this book is definitely for you. It's so fun to get into all of the relationships, the younger generation, the older generation, the men, the women. It's just, the way they work together is really fascinating here. But and I say this is a rom-com in disguise because it's true. Like, I think it almost looks like a very intellectual book that, goes into philosophy and whatnot. But really, like, there's so many moments in here that made me blush
Yeah.
and be really embarrassed on behalf of some of these characters. And just, it's so fun and very romantic. So in that sense, I think for different kinds of readers, like this will really tug at different heartstrings, whether you are an intellectual reader or a romance reader. So I think that's part of why this book did so well and was adapted in so many ways. Before we move on to close reading some passages, I'm going to stop sharing for a second. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions so far about the overview of the book, the author, like why it did well, and why we're reading it and discussing it?
Actually, so yeah,
Yeah.
before you deep dive into the book, I was curious, is when you were talking about serialization being popular in Japan,
Hmm.
so it seems like it's a concept to me that makes me think of like Charles Dickens or something like from the 1800s,
Yeah.
right? It's not as big of a
Yes.
thing here in the United States unless I'm missing it. So I wonder if you had thoughts on why it was more popular in Japan versus the US.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Maybe somebody else has an answer to this, but I think for me, every time I go back to Tokyo to visit family, I notice that the magazine industry is still really strong in Japan, and especially the women's fashion magazines. They come out every month. They're always very thick and really high quality. Like the paper's high quality, the
Mm.
content is really well done. In a way that I think the magazine industry in America is sadly fading away
Right.
because a lot of it's digitized,
Mhm.
or people just don't want to have so many, you know, I know that for my friends who get like the New Yorker
Sure.
delivered every week, like it just piles up
They
for them.
pile up. Yeah. Right.
Whereas in Japan, I think there's still a culture of like you still want to buy magazines. So I think that's partly why. But and yeah, does anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Allison. Do you have a?
Yeah, I did a podcast episode on this and I'll see what I can remember. The
Oh, wonderful.
the first important bit is that serialization used to be really, really popular in the West, and actually Japan kind of has its own magazine print culture, but the idea of serializing a story from issue to issue in a newspaper or a magazine was learned from the West on purpose during the Meiji period. And there was a time in the US where you weren't taken seriously as an author if your books were published in just one book.
Mm.
But that changed slowly before the Second World War. And serialization was more or less dead, except in genre publishing by the Second World War. My best guess why it's still a thing in Japan is because so many prizes especially the Akutagawa, are tied to journal publishing. So the Akutagawa Prize, the award-winning story, has to be published in one of Japan's magazines or literary journals. So I would guess that's not the only reason that magazine publishing is still such a big thing, but I think it's not unrelated.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that that was the requirement for the Akutagawa Prize, and that it's basically like the Pulitzer, in Japan. Like if you get that prize, you're set as a writer. But thank you so much for sharing that, Allison. I'm definitely going to listen to your podcast episode about it later. Any other thoughts or questions about that, or anything else before we close read? Oh, I just want to do a little fun exercise. Who here owns a dictionary in their house? I see like maybe half and half. Okay. And no shame, but I feel like even though I have this, I have one copy, the Merriam-Webster, like this is, the paperback. It's not like I look at it. I think I just have it in case we have a blackout and we need to look up some, I don't know, that's so silly, but we can probably look up any word by Googling it now. But yeah, this book, Reading the Great Passage, if you haven't done so already, if you read it, it will make you want to buy one, I think. It really makes a strong case for owning that paper product. There's even a section which I don't think we'll get into when we look at the passages, but there's a wonderful scene towards the end where they're talking with the paper makers who they're assigning to print the dictionary, and they're so precise and about like the way the paper feels on your fingertips. And just even that part alone made me really want to test the books that I own and see like, what kind of paper is this? Is it waxy? Is it, anyway, so I hope that, this book also made me really want to support the dictionary industry. Like it just, I got a little bit sad thinking about like how hard it is to convince people to still get one. But yeah, I think the novel and the story makes a very compelling case. So, oh my gosh, Allison, look at you. Used to work at the OED. That is such a cool job. You're just wearing so many hats. I love it. All right, so I'm going to share my screen again to a PDF excerpt that I made. And here is when I'm going to call on. So this is for those who might have the book in front of you, I'm going to have us look at page 14 and 15. And this is one of the first times that Araki, if you remember, he's the older editor. He's trying to recruit a new person to join the dictionary department, and he meets Majime for the first time. This is just a little funny interaction, but also very informative. And here's where they start talking about the definitions of words. So, Mary, could I have you unmute yourself and start reading from If Someone Asked You? And this quote starts from Araki's perspective.
Okay. Can y'all hear me?
Mhm.
If someone asked you to define the word Miji, right, what would you say? Right as in the direction or right as in politics? The former. Let me think. He tilted his head pensively, swinging his long hair. Defining it as the hand used to hold a pen or chopsticks would ignore all the left-handed people in the world. The side of the body that doesn't contain the heart wouldn't work either, since a few people do have their heart on the right side. Maybe something like this would be the safest. When facing north, the side of the body that is to the east. Okay, then how would you explain Shima? Stripes? Island? The place name? The suffix in words like Yokoshima, evil, and Sakashima, upside down? Conjecture? As in the four-character phrase Shima Oksaku, conjecture and surmise, the four devils of Buddhism. As Majima reeled off possible candidates, Araki hastily cut him short. Shima as in island. All right, something like a body of land surrounded by water? No, that wouldn't do. Enoshima is connected by a bridge with the mainland, in which case, Majima muttered to himself with his head still pensively tilted to one side, seemingly oblivious to Araki as he considered the meaning of the word. Maybe something like a comparatively small body of land surrounded or set off by water. But wait, that's no good either. It doesn't include the sense of gangster territory. Then how about land set apart from its surroundings? He was the genuine article. Araki looked on with admiration. It had only taken seconds for Majima to work out the underlying meaning of Shima. Back when he'd put the same question to Nishioka,
Nishioka.
Nishioka, the results had been dismal. Nishioka had never considered any possible meaning but island, and his answer had been something sticking up from the sea. Appalled, Araki had yelled, "Idiot! Then the back of a whale and a downed man are Shima, are they?" Nishioka had looked flustered and then laughed foolishly. "Oops, you're right. Gee, that's a tough one. What should I say then?" Majima stood, nodding intently to himself, and then swiveled toward the bookcases. "Let me go look it up." "Never mind." Araki grabbed him by the arm. Looking him straight in the eye, he said, "Majima, I want to give all you've got to Daitoke." "Daitoke?" said Majima. "Okay." The next moment, he let out a kind of yodel. Everyone turned and stared. Araki was perplexed, but as Majima went on singing, it dawned on him. This was the hit song Daitoke, the Big City, by Crystal King sung totally off key. Oh, sung totally off key, sorry. Quickly, he yanked Majima out into the corridor, mid-warble. No, that's not it. Forget it." "No?" Majima broke off, looking disconsolate. "Sorry about that. I'm not really up on the latest songs." Where the hell did he get the idea he'd been asked to sing? The fellow's thought processes were mystifying. Araki decided to tell him what he'd come for. "Listen to me. Daitoke, the Great Passage, is the name of a new dictionary, one that's still in the planning stage. The title is written with the characters for Crossing the Ocean, and I want to entrust the job to you."
Thank you so much for reading that passage. I love that. That this is the first time these two characters are meeting and they're already deep into definitions of things. Just for fun, I want to read you the definition in the Merriam-Webster dictionary for left. Ever since reading this novel, I've been wanting to compare it with other definitions. So in this book, they make the point that there's some people whose hearts are on the right side, so you can't say the side on, and it's like some people are left-handed, so you can't say the dominant hand or whatnot. Okay, so left in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, left, left. Okay, here we go. Left. Of, relating to, or being on the side of the body in which the heart is mostly located. That is the first definition in the Merriam-Webster. It does say mostly where the heart is located. So, it takes into account the minority of people whose hearts are on the other side. The second one, constituted by the political left. And then it goes into, and this one really frustrates me. It says the side or part that is on or toward the left side. It's like, you can't use the word in the word, for the definition. So these are the kinds of things that I feel like we all maybe take for granted a little bit in a dictionary. Like nobody's really gonna look up a word that they might already know the meaning of. But when you do, you kind of start to question, like, who wrote these? And so I think that's where this novel, The Great Passage, it takes great pains to talk about the people behind this project, this Japanese dictionary where and I think this is a fair stereotype of Japanese people, that they're very meticulous and they don't want to make, they're perfectionists. So, when they're working on a dictionary and when they're working on the definition of left, they need to get it as objective as possible. And that definition of, when facing north, it's to the east. That's a very I think that's the perfect definition, but I have yet to see it in the Merriam-Webster. So before we move on to the next passage, does anybody have a comment or question about that? And thank you, Mary, for reading. Okay, the next part that I want to share with you is on page 31. So I'm going to scroll down here a little bit. And William, I'm going to have you read this part for me. Okay, so we're doing something similar here where they're talking about, it's two people talking about a definition of a word. And this is kind of cheeky. And like I said, it's, this is a rom-com in disguise. So we're getting a little bit into it on page 31. William, would you mind reading from the beginning of this page, starting from ignoring? And this is two characters. This is still Majime, but the other one is Nishioka, the colleague who's, still referenced in the other excerpt too, but confident, but kind of, shallow.
I haven't read out loud in a while, so
No,
I'll try my best, but
you'll do great.
Ignoring Majime's flustered appearance, Nishioka appeared at his desktop. What are you working on anyway? Nishioka was the biggest reason Majime felt out of place in this department. The tempo of his conversation, the fluctuating distances, both physical and psychological, that he maintained with coworkers, the precision of his work, all were beyond the bounds of Majime's understanding. Every time he came into contact with Nishioka, he flinched. Nothing in particular. Renai, love, romantic attachment. Nishioka's sharp eyes had caught the entry of Majime, had been examining, and he proceeded to read the definition aloud. Love, noun, a feeling of special affection for a particular member of the opposite sex that causes exhilaration and the desire to be alone with that person and share a sense of emotional intimacy, including, if possible, physical intimacy, so that one fluctuates between a state of despair when unfulfilled and, on rare occasions, a fulfillment of one of delight. Oh, I know this one, said Nishioka. It's from the New Clear Dictionary of Japanese, right? Yes, 5th edition. The one that's famous for its quirky definitions. So what's the story? Beg your pardon? You can't fool me. Nishioka rolled his chair closer and laid an arm across Majime's shoulder. You're in love. Fess up. No, I was just thinking. Majime straightened his glasses and pushed them back to the top of his nose, where they'd been before. Nishioka jostled him. It's certainly a unique definition, but I wonder if it's inappropriate to limit the object of romantic love to a particular member of the opposite sex. Whoa, Nishioka removed his arm and slid his chair back to his own desk. Are you by any chance one of those people? What people? What was he talking about? Letting Nishioka's comment pass, Majime began to thumb through the various dictionaries on his desk. They all had an entry for an I, but in every case, it was defined as an emotional between a man and a woman. In light of reality, such an explanation was hardly accurate. On the example collection card, he drew a double circle to signify a word of high importance that should definitely be included. In the column for comments, he wrote, just between men and women, check foreign dictionaries as well. Only then did the significance of Nishioka's question penetrate his brain. No, I don't think so, he said. Probably not. What are you talking about? So far, everyone I ever felt a desire to share a sense of emotional and physical intimacy with has been a member of the opposite sex. But I've yet to experience a state of delight on a rare occasion of fulfillment, so in that sense, I haven't yet had a complete experience of love, which is why I qualified my statement by saying probably not.
Okay, we can pause there. Thank you so much for reading that, William. So just, as a fun exercise, again, I'm going to read the definition of love in the Merriam-Webster. The first is very simple, strong affection. Second definition, warm attachment, in parentheses, of the sea. So you can have love for the sea. That's the second definition of love. The third, attraction based on sexual desire. Fourth, a beloved person. 5, unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for others. And then the sixth definition, a score of 0 in tennis. I actually have no idea what that, I guess love is a term in tennis. I didn't know that. So the Merriam-Webster keeps it very, genderless and kind of distant, but strong affection. That's the main strong affection, love. So that's just a fun little, comparison too with the Japanese dictionary project that they're working on. So the process, when you read this, is that the editors are constantly working with these index cards with these words and definitions and comparing them with the other existing dictionaries and trying to figure out how they could do better. And so, their office is just littered with index cards and files and papers and just imagine like a very just like a room filled with cards with pencil notations and majime in the center of it. So yeah, before we move on to the next excerpt, I just wanted to open it up to see if anybody had a thought or question or comment about that.
That's so interesting how like different cultures understand what love is to them. So I wonder what the definition of love is in Japanese. Like, is it similar to the definition in English too?
Yeah, my project this summer when I go back to visit my dad in Tokyo is to buy a Japanese dictionary so that I can compare. Yeah, I do think though this novel probably stays pretty close to the real dictionary definitions that exist out there. So the one that they were reading, about like people of opposite sex being attracted to each other, like that's probably how at least it was, I don't know how it is now, but yeah. Other thoughts or comments or questions?
Why is it that in like anime, a lot of times I like you stands in for I love you? What's the difference there?
Oh my gosh, Allison, I love that question so much. So yes, I don't want to claim to be an expert on this particular thing, but I have noticed that too as a Japanese person. And in America, right? Like if you like someone, if you're romantically involved, you would say, you might say I like you, but I love you is, the big reveal, right? That you would say to someone. In Japanese, though, even when you get there with somebody, even when you're like really romantically and when you're confessing your love to somebody, it translates to, you would say ski, which translates to like. I shiteru. People might say that, but that comes across so strongly and a kind of like, I think it's probably just a cultural thing, but it almost sounds too passionate. I love you. No, I think it's like there's something though um there's something very deep about saying I like you in that romantic context. Like even though the word is like, the meaning behind it is love. Um, and I think Japanese language works this way in other words too. Like you would say something, you would almost subdue it even when you mean it to be something bigger than it is. I can't think of another example off the top of my head. Maybe somebody else can, but yeah. Other thoughts or questions on that? Or does anybody else have an answer to why Japanese people say I like you instead of I love you? Yeah, I'll have to ask around my Japanese friends too and see what their take on that might be. But yeah, certainly very interesting. Okay. I'm going to share my screen again. And the next excerpt I want us to look at, let's see, maybe we can go to page 20. This is here. All right. So, Mary, could I have you unmute yourself again? And let's take a look at this little part, starting with, do you know why we decided to call our new dictionary The Great Passage?
Okay. Do you know why we decided to call our new dictionary The Great Passage? Araki asked, unable to contain himself. Majima was nibbling peanuts one at a time, squirrel-like. Mrs. Sasaki tapped a finger lightly on the table to draw his attention. Only then did he realize that the question had been addressed to him. Flustered, he shook his head. A dictionary is a ship that crosses the sea of words, said Araki, with a sense that he was laying bare his innermost soul. People travel on it and gather the small points of light floating on the dark surface of the waves. They do this in order to tell someone their thoughts accurately, using the best possible words. Without dictionaries, all any of us could do is linger before the vastness of the deep. We need to build a ship suitable for an ocean crossing, Professor Matsumoto said quietly. With that thought in mind, Araki and I decided on this title. It's in your hands now. As if he had heard these unspoken words, Majima lowered his hands to the table and straightened his back. His eyes were shining. How many entries will there be? What will set the great passage apart from other dictionaries? I want to hear all about it. Do you want me to keep going?
Oh yeah, you can keep going.
Sure. Professor Matsumoto put down his chopsticks and picked up his pencil. Mrs. Sasaki took out a notebook from her briefcase and laid it open. Araki said, "Okay, here goes," and opened his mouth to relate his conception of the new dictionary.
Thank you. So, in case you're curious, I paused the excerpt here because what happens is they're having a dinner here to get to know all of the editors working on this, and Nishioka interrupts and says, "Actually, no. First, we need to do a toast." And so the answer never, gets you never know what the answer is to that, and then they just keep drinking and having fun. And so I think this is page 20 of the book. So this is a fun little literary trick that the novelist pulls. It's like the whole book is going to essentially answer this question of why is this dictionary so important? And it's not such a clear-cut answer. In fact, it's throughout this, and I will say this novel, it's only about 200 pages, and it's very readable. Like if you were to take a weekend, you could probably finish it by then. It's not like we read another book recently called Butter that was over 300 pages, and that was a pretty long one. But this one is very approachable, very readable. But in those 200 pages, you will get an answer to that. So, if you were curious about the meaning of the title and why they're relating a dictionary to a sea of words, a passage, a ship. Does anybody have any thoughts on this or questions that
I
come
just
out?
will say, I love that metaphor. I mean, I'm so intrigued by the whole idea. I have not read the book. I just learned about this today, so I was very happy to sign up for this Zoom. I live in Nashville, and I'm just excited to know about you guys. I didn't know anything about the organization, but I'm just totally intrigued by the book, the story. I love dictionaries. I love words, the meaning of words. And so I'm just very excited to be discussing it. So thank you for
Yeah.
the
Well, thank you,
opportunity.
Mary, for coming. I'm so glad that you found us.
Thanks.
Any thoughts or questions about how a dictionary is like a ship crossing a sea of words?
No, but it does kind of make you kind of sad that people don't use dictionaries anymore, after the story and thinking about what they're going through to find the perfect meaning to the words, and we just don't. It's really sad. Used to be, it would be right next to on your desk, like right next to your hand, because you would go to that dictionary. Also with the thesaurus, too, like those two books would be within reach always before we could get everything from the computer. I know.
Yeah, it is. I mean, but it's interesting because even within this novel, like I was saying with like the book publishers and the drama between, the top people in the publishing house being like, why do you need to keep working on this? Even in Japan, I think it's pretty rare now for somebody to own a paper dictionary. So, yeah, I think this is something that's just happening worldwide as we digitize everything and feel like we can have everything on our fingertips. But when you Google a definition and it gives you an AI generated answer, you're not, seeing the hard work, the blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. So, oh, dictionary.com is AI. Yes. Thank you, Allison, for that reminder too. If you want to look up a word, let's use Merriam-Webster because at least there's humans behind it. Um, yeah, for sure. It is very sad and nostalgic in a way to think about the way we used to use paper dictionaries. And an interesting note for those who, are thinking of reading this, in structure and timeline, it does a very interesting thing where about halfway through the book, you jump forward in time like 13 years. And then it goes from the perspective of Kishibe, the young female editor, who, when she meets Majime, he's like, has gray hairs. Is older, even though in the beginning of the book, he's this young guy in his maybe mid-20s. And so you do feel that sense of like time, even through reading this novel, just the sheer amount of time. And also they had to pause a lot of times because they were asked to revise another like student dictionary, or in an absurd turn of events, Majime has to work on a dictionary that's like, I mean, it's kind of like a Pokemon dictionary. Like he has to work on this side project that will make money in order to keep working on the Great Passage. So yeah, even in Japan, I don't know if it's appreciated, but maybe because of the popularity of this story, maybe there's a little resurgence. All right, so the next part that I want to share is one of my favorite bits of the book, which is when and this is a motif or part that comes back kind of multiple times throughout the book, but we're going to take a look at Majime's love letter that he writes to Kaguya. And it's so embarrassing because when we see it, it's from the perspective of that young female editor who comes across this love letter, even though, for her, Majime is her boss and a little intimidating and awkward. But then she comes across the love letter he wrote to Kaguya many years ago. And if you buy this book, at the very end, you can read the love letter in full. And it's like 10 pages long. Uh, so just imagine this very awkward man who is a terrible communicator with humans, trying to express his love for this beautiful young chef girl. So William, I'm sorry to do this, but I'm gonna I'm gonna ask for your help in reading some portions of this. So let's start with, okay, greetings. That's how this letter starts. And this is, when it's not the letter, it's from the perspective of Kishibe, the young woman who was transferred from the fashion magazine department, and she's kind of wondering what she's doing in the dictionary department there.
See, you've made me read the awkward part. All right. Greetings. Cold winds are blowing, a reminder of the swift approach of winter's frosty skies. I trust that you are well. Who wrote this letter? To whom was it written? Was it something she should be reading? Worried, she checked the signature at the end, and in doing so, realized there were 15 sheets of stationery, a magnum opus for a letter. At the end of the 15th sheet, she read, to Kaguya Hayashi from Mitsuya Majime, November 20XX. Holy cow, stifling her excitement, she returned to her seat. Kaguya Hayashi was the chef at Back of the Moon, and Majime's wife. Then this was what? A love letter? It sure didn't start out like one. Casually, she sneaked a glance at Majime, who was still in hibernating squirrel mode. Only his unkempt head of hair showed between the stacks of books on his desk. Kichibe settled back in her chair and began to peruse the pages. It was a love letter, all right. At once earnest and ridiculous, and chock full of Chinese characters, making it hard to read. The sentences were awkward. Majime must have been extremely nervous when he wrote it. His very desperation to find some way of conveying his feelings led him around and around in circles, so that he never got to the point. There's an example in the ancient tale of a radiant princess named Kaguya, Shining Knight, who descended to earth from the moon, and indeed from the night I first encountered you. I have felt such pain in my chest and found breathing so difficult that it is as if I myself were living on the moon. She read this sentence over several times and decided it meant, I have loved you from the day I met you. You give me butterflies, probably. But all he really needed to write was, I love you. What a lot of beating around the bush. Reflecting Majime's fluctuating emotional state, the letter kept on rising and falling until it entered the climax. If I were to write my present feelings in plain terms, I would sum them up this way. Kaguya, Kaguya, what shall I do with you? What on earth is this? Wasn't this a reference to that poem by Zhang Yu, the ancient Chinese rebel? From the famous one he had written in desperate straits surrounded by the enemy, Kichibei remembered reading it in high school in our classical Chinese class. The last line was addressed to his lover and started out, uh, Guya Guya, which meant oh you. And she recalled the whole line went, Guya Guya, what shall I do with you? Should he keep the one he loved with him in this time of imminent peril, or release her and allow her to live, knowing that a fate crueler than death might await her? The line conveyed the agony of a man at the limit of endurance, torn by his love for a woman, a powerful, unforgettable poem. But what of Majima's love letter? He had probably congratulated himself on his cleverness in substituting Kaguya for Guya Guya, but no, it wasn't clever. It was god awful. She felt a rising tide of emotion, a confused mix of anger and hysterical laughter. There was just too much of a gap between Zhang Yu on the boundary of life and death and Majime in the dictionary editorial department, his hair sticking out every which way. The words, what shall I do with you, couldn't help but differ in meaning and weight. She wanted to go back in time and wring Majime's neck for writing such a thing. It sounded as if he were taking on the persona of Zhang Yu, only to insinuate, Kaguya baby, I want to do something to you. After all that, he ended the long missive with these words. This is all I have to say, or no, this is not all I want to say. But if I tried to say it all, even if I lived 150 years, it wouldn't be enough, and I would use up so much paper they would need to cut down every tree in the rainforest. So I'll rest my pen here. I would be very grateful if, after reading this, you would let me know what you think. Whatever your response, I am prepared. I will take it solemnly to heart. Do take care of yourself. After undulating waves of hyperbole, beseeching, and declamation, the letter ended abruptly with a plea for her to take care of herself. Asked what she thought, Kaguya must have been at a total loss. Out of the corner of her eye, Kichibei saw Majime get up. Hastily, she shoved the pages into the space between her knees and the desk. Miss Kichibei, there's something I forgot to tell you. Yes.
Okay, so we can pause there. Thank you so much, William, for reading that. And like I put in the margins here, you can read the complete. I was wrong. It's 15 pages, not 10. You can read the complete letter at the end of this novel. And what's so fun about it, if you have the book, and I didn't include this in the excerpts we shared just because it does feel a little bit like a spoiler almost, but I'll just show you what it looks like. It's like the full letter on the right column. You can see what Majime wrote, and on the right side, it's annotations by Nishioka and Kishibe. Like they're kind of making fun of him a little bit, but also in an endearing way that I think if it weren't for their discovery of this love letter, their working relationship would have just been so stressful, and they would have continued to see Majime as this like very serious, awkward man that they don't know how to work with. But because of this god awful love letter, it kind of brought him down. Like it made him less intimidating, and like his colleagues were able to see him in this new light as this very, bumbling man, but who still had a lot of heart. So I just that's one of my favorite parts. And like I said, it gives way to that rom-com nature of the book. So yeah, that was the last excerpt that I wanted to share. But does anybody have any like thoughts, questions, any reactions as William was reading that? Like, was anybody else just so so embarrassed for Majime on his behalf, like I was? Yeah, I see
I
some
would
nodding
love
heads.
I would love to receive a love letter like that, honestly, because I feel like it says so much more than just I love you, like you could really feel what he was, trying to say, but also really embarrassing if someone else saw it.
And yeah, to be on, I mean, to your point, yeah, it's romantic, but like imagine receiving 15 pages of that and then just being like, what do I do? What do I say? And if you read the book, you'll know what happens. But yeah. Any other thoughts or questions or comments?
Yeah, it's like
Well,
I was
yeah, go
gonna say,
ahead.
one of those things that you would write like as a draft, and then you would go back and make a much shorter version of what you've written. That's right. So yeah, it is.
I almost want to imagine that this was Majime's edited version. Like, I like to imagine that he actually wrote many more
More.
pages and he was like, this is gonna be tight, and like it's gonna this is it.
15 pages is a lot of love for a letter.
And
So
for someone that, if you read, like, for context, they've maybe had like 2 conversations. Yeah. Does anybody have any thoughts or questions about like the novel as a whole or the author or any other aspects of the story? Oh, very Pride and Prejudice when Darcy likes. Yes, yes. Thank you, Alicia, for that comment. It does have a very Jane Austen like feel to this. Yeah, Majime, I think, would have maybe done a little better in those olden times. But in the 21st century, a bit questionable. Sammy, did you have a comment?
No, no, no. I was
Oh,
just.
I thought I saw you raise your hand.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, my hands
No,
are
no,
going.
no.
I do
Yeah.
actually have a question
Yeah, go ahead.
about the title. So I can't remember what the title in Japanese was again. What was it?
Oh, it was fune o amu, which means to weave a ship, to weave or knit a ship.
Oh, okay. So I was just wondering, I wonder why for the English translation, they didn't, keep that one and change it to
Yeah.
the message. So that was my question.
That is an interesting question, and I feel like yeah, I wonder if I this might have even been either the translator or the English publishers. Yeah, publishers do, yeah, like Allison's saying in the chat, they do all kinds of nonsense to English titles. The Great Passage, though, is the translation of the dictionary that they're working on. So, um, maybe they were thinking that to weave a ship might sound a little too abstract, perhaps. But I think in Japanese book titles, and we've seen this in the other works that we've discussed in this space before, like oftentimes they're very different. Um, but I think in Japanese books, you could get away with more poetry in the titles and people will still buy it. But in American book publishing, you kind of need to have a little more of that marketing, like buzzy, just like what's the title that's gonna feel like a title of a book you're gonna have on your bookshelf. I don't know. It's maybe more about the marketing than the translation of the poetry of it. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. But Butter was still Butter. Yeah, that was still the same title. And trying to think if there was other ones that have really changed a lot. Um, hmm. Wild Sheep Chase. What was that in Japanese? Do you know, I have that book in the English, but not in the Japanese. That's the Murakami book. Yeah, they do all sorts of things with Murakami titles for sure. Yeah.
Butter is one of those titles, though. By the way, that if you saw it in Barnes and Noble, or if there is a Barnes and Noble, you'd be like, "Oh, Butter, I'm interested." Yeah, you have my attention. You know.
Yeah. And when we discussed the book, it was still in hardcover, but I saw that in the paperback, the spine makes it look like a stick of butter,
Oh, that's
which I
cool.
thought was so clever. Yes. Um, yeah, so there's just a ton of really wonderful Japanese novels that are translated out there, and I highly encourage you to, keep exploring and keep, and I'm so appreciative of all of you, um, coming here to share the space with me and let me nerd out about these books. But before we wrap up, I just want to give one last chance. Does anybody have a burning thought or question before we end tonight? All right. Well, and also if anybody has any suggestions for which Japanese novel we should discuss next, please feel free to reach out to me. You can find me. I have a website that's just my name, yurinayoshikawa.com, and I'll see any message that comes through there. And if you're in Nashville, I hope you'll check out the Porch where I work. If you're interested in creative writing or any kind of, a community of writers and readers, it's a great place to meet people. We also do online classes for those who are not based here. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the lovely comment in the chat. I really appreciate you as well, Allison and Mary. Mary and William, thank you for reading out loud. That really helped me, as always. So. And please stay tuned for more JAST events. If you're already on the newsletter, perhaps you'll be aware of them. And if we do another session of reading between the lines, that's the fastest way you'll know. So,
That's right.
and thank you, Carol, for zooming in from Colorado. That's amazing. This is one of those magical things about Zoom, that we can all connect like this. So, yeah. And thank you, Sammy and Ginger and everybody at JAST.